Hello everybody, Mr. Wilson here, and I'm making this video today because I've been starting to read a book that has a lot of relevance to some of the stuff that's going on here in the United States, mainly, which I think will help give some insight and I don't know, just help people think on how things are and how you want them to change, and maybe that we're going at things all wrong, and maybe understand why things are still going the way they are when we know things should be getting better. But yeah, let me get into this here. The book I've been reading, it's called No Treason, The Constitution of No Authority by Lysander Spooner. And let me switch over here. And the section of this book I'm going to read to you, because it has, well, the entire book has relevance, but this is the most, I want to say, important part so far that I've read. The rest is just kind of enlightenment, in a sense. But we'll start here in the beginning of the book, Chapter 1, Part 2, where it asks the question, what is implied in a government resting on consent? If it be said that the consent of the strongest party in a nation is all that is necessary to justify the establishment of a government that shall have authority over the weaker party, it may be answered that the most despotic government in the world rests upon that very principle, as the consent of the strongest party. These governments are formed simply by the consent or agreement of the strongest party that they will act in concert in subjecting the weaker party to their dominion, my bad. And the despotism and tyranny and injustice of these governments consist in that very fact, or at least that is the first step in their tyranny, and necessary preliminary to all the oppressions that are to follow. If it be said that the consent of the most numerous party in a nation is sufficient to justify the establishment of their power over the less numerous party, it may be answered, first, that two men have no more natural right to exercise any kind of authority over one than one has to exercise the same authority over two. A man's natural rights are his own against the whole world, and any infringement of them is equally a crime, whether committed by one man or by 1 million or by millions, whether committed by one man calling himself a robber, or maybe any other name indicating his true character, or by millions calling themselves a government. Alright, I'm going to pause right there for the moment, and with that, sorry for my reading here. not that good of a reader, not much of a reader. But that first section right there that I just read definitely give you a lot to think about. Alright, well, moving on. Second, it would be absurd for the most numerous party to talk of establishing a government over the less numerous party, unless the former were also the strongest, as well as the most numerous. For it is not to be supposed that the strongest party would ever submit to the rule of the weaker party, merely because the latter were the most numerous. And as a matter of fact, it is perhaps never that governments are established by the most numerous party. They are usually, if not always, established by the less numerous party. Their superior strength consists of their superior wealth, intelligence, and ability to act in concert. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? Ring a bell to anybody that I stated that right now? Think about it while I read on. Third, our Constitution does not profess to have been established simply by the majority, but by the people, the minority as much as the majority. Fourth, if our fathers in 1776 had acknowledged the principle that the majority had the right to rule the minority, we should never have become a nation, for they were in a small minority as compared with those who claimed the right to rule over them. Fifth, majorities as such afford no guarantees for justice. They are men of the same nature as minorities. They have the same passions for fame, power, and money as minorities, and are liable and likely to be equally, perhaps more than equally, because more boldly rapacious, tyrannical, and unprincipled if entrusted with power. There is no more reason than why a man should either sustain or submit to the rule of the majority than of a minority. Majorities and minorities cannot rightfully be taken at all into account in deciding questions of justice, and all talk about them in matters of government is mere absurdity. Men are dunces for uniting to sustain any government or any laws except those in which they are all agreed. And nothing but force and fraud compel men to sustain any other. To say that majorities as such have a right to rule minorities is equivalent to saying that minorities have and ought to have no rights except such as majorities please to allow them. And I pause for effect there. Starting to sink in yet? I'll read on. Sixth, it is not improbable that many or most of the worst of governments, although established by force and by a few, in the first place, come in time to be supported by a majority. But if they do, this majority is composed in large part of the most ignorant, superstitious, timid, dependent, servile, and corrupt portions of the people, of those who have been overawed by the power, intelligence, wealth, and arrogance of those who have been deceived by the frauds, and of those who have been corrupted by the inducements of the few who really constitute the government. Such majorities very likely could be found in half, perhaps 9/10 of all the countries on the globe. What do they prove? Nothing but the tyranny and corruption of the very governments that have reduced so large portions of the people to their present ignorance, servility, degradation, and corruption. And ignorance, servility, degradation, and corruption that are best illustrated in the simple fact that they do sustain governments that have so oppressed, degraded, and corrupted them. They do nothing towards proving that the governments themselves are legitimate, or that they ought to be sustained or even endured by those who understand their true character. The mere fact, therefore, that a government chances to be sustained by a majority of itself proves nothing that is necessary to be proved in order to know whether such government should be sustained or not. Anybody got thoughts on that? Sound familiar at all? Alright, well, here's the finish. Seventh, the principle that the majority have a right to rule the minority practically resolves all government into a mere contest between two bodies of men, as to which of them shall be masters and which of them slaves. A contest that, however bloody, can be in the nature of things never be finally closed so long as men refuse to be a slave. Now, just with that right there, I've come to the conclusion that as great a document as our Constitution and the Bill of Rights were, all it is a piece of paper, really. And I'm sure that's what a lot of people that are in the government, a good portion of them who we've elected, and some of them who we haven't elected because they were put in the position by people that we have elected, or something of that nature. But I think the biggest thing to get out of this is that nobody has rule over anyone. Period. We rule ourselves, and that's how it should be. If anything, all rules and laws that have been passed since the founding of this country can considerably considered as guidelines. Just mere guidelines. That people wish others to follow. Now, I've listened to the audio book of the same thing periodically, and one thing I've gotten out of it, and hence the reason why I'm just going to read it myself, but like I said, one thing I got out of it is from what the author is implying, government's not needed. So long as people are willing to rule themselves and act within a fashion that is feasible to everybody, basically, in a sense, I guess if you want to put this in a religious standpoint, following the commandments, making sure that you're just an upstanding person who's good, not to do anything bad. That I guess everything that we have right now, we could change it easily. But as everybody knows, it's that whole majority minority rule over everybody mentality right now. And hell, if anything that's been stated in here, we've set ourselves up for the tyranny, the despotism, the everything that we have considerably right now, in which the only thing I would have hopes on that would be a saving grace if anything were to happen to me, say in any legal sense, with my day-to-day stuff that I do, is that if I were to say I do not consent to any of it, that I'd be left alone, because if I don't consent to something, no matter what it is, to force it upon me, tyrannical. slowly but surely learning a lot of different things over the years. And it's just crazy how mind-changing that learning certain things are. So I'm going to leave it at that. I hope everybody enjoyed my reading here. Like I said, sorry for my problems in reading. But I suggest you go out and get this book yourself. What was it, like $1.99 for Kindle on Amazon? So get that version. Otherwise, I think the book, depending on where you get it from, is anywhere between $12 and $15. So it's fairly cheap, but a very good read. I'm quite sure of it. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. I hope to make more in the future. Maybe put some news nuggets out there. I don't know. I like music, so if anybody likes music, I may end up doing some broadcasts eventually. But yeah. Alright. Well, that's all, and it's Mr. Wilson saying I'll see you on the flip side.